as it relates to us as human beings, there are needs that we need met. We do need those needs met, and it's reinforcing that it doesn't make you needy to make sure your needs are being met. Because I think there's this thought behind it that if I make sure my needs are being met, I'm being too needy. And I think that's stopping us from getting the things that we need. I think it's stopping us from asking for what we need to the point where we're sabotaging ourselves.
Welcome back to the You Need a Counselor podcast. This is a show presented by Heart and Solutions Counseling Agency. We release new episodes every Sunday at 5 p.m. Central and encourage you to batch up that laundry, put away the dishes, plan for the week ahead, or do any other task that might seem daunting while you give our show a listen. You might just be encouraged to call your therapist, connect with this week's guest, or seek out those services you've been considering for a while but haven't made the commitment to yet. If you are in the state of Iowa and are in need of mental or behavioral health counseling, give us a call at 1-800-531-4236. Enjoy the show.
Hello, welcome back to You Need a Counselor podcast. My name is Dr. Julie Johnson. I'm the president and founder here at Heart and Solutions Counseling Agency in Iowa.
And I'm Chrissa Hunt. I am our vice president in charge of the behavioral health department. And this is our podcast, You Need a Counselor. So we are designed for people curious about counseling, but have barriers keeping them from experiencing the benefits of counseling. Our mission is to share stories about counseling, good, bad, and indifferent, and spread the message that everyone can benefit from mental health and behavioral health counseling services.
Our guest today is one of my personal favorite guests that we've had on the show. This is her third time appearing on this show, and I always just find it personally very helpful to talk to this guest. So we've got Caurel Richards here on the podcast today. Welcome, Caurel. Caurel is a hypnotherapist. She is a rapid transformational therapy practitioner. She is the founder and operator of the company In Divine Thyme Transformational Services. She's got a brand new website that we were checking out before the show. It looks awesome. And Caurel is now focusing on chronic pain and the emotional connection between early childhood trauma and chronic pain that we might experience in our adult years. And she is focusing on working with athletes with chronic pain, which I think is so interesting and such a huge need. Athletes have some of the same barriers to working on or talking about traumatic experiences, working through trauma that we've talked about recently with first responders, that we've talked about recently with veterans. The athletes can have a lot of those same barriers to treatment. And so I love that, that Caurel, you're focusing on working specifically with athletes. So how are you? Welcome back to the show.
Yes, I guess third time's the charm, maybe the fourth. Always happy to return, always happy to share my insight and also get some insights and even just to have the conversation. So I'm grateful to be here.
Yeah, we love having you here. It's just always very informational and very, very fun. So it's wonderful to have you here. Okay, so chronic pain. A this is kind of different from the last couple of times we've talked to you. The last couple of times we've talked about leadership, entrepreneurship. Tell us about how did you transition into focusing on chronic pain?
That's a very good question. Very good question. You know what? And if you've noticed, I am always evolving, always trying to do things differently, especially when I see there's an area that is needed, there's support that is needed. I was once myself an athlete, a very long time ago, I might add. We're not going to give numbers here, but I was an athlete myself, and I remember because I also share my story often with the Stigma Free Society here in Canada. And one day I was sharing this story, and I'm like, oh my God, like this is so full circle, recognizing the journey of being an athlete and the turmoil, the emotional turmoil that you don't deal with. I was more of the avoidant type that knew it was happening, but was just like, you know what, whatever, I'll deal with it another time. And affected my performance. I didn't even recognize how it was affecting my performance. So it was just like a random moment, just a full circle moment, which happens with me often, that I decided, you know what, this is the avenue that I've been destined. It's like I said, that full circle moment where you know that this is where you're supposed to be.
So it sounds like you have like your own personal experience dealing with this, which has led to your work. Can you give some examples or things that worked for you that you now do with your own clients?
Oh boy. So I'll give you a backstory. I've been swimming since I was 2. I've been on the track since I came out the womb. I've been running, but being as talented as I was, what I recognized that kind of placed a damper on my performance altogether was the fact that I didn't feel like I was supported. I didn't feel like I had the support that I needed to get through certain moments. So yeah, you have your coaches, you have your teammates, but we don't recognize the trauma that can cause you to doubt your skills, doubt who you are, and essentially how you perform. The absence of a parent. And that was something that happened with me where I was performing so well. I was at the top of my game in terms of track and field, and there was no one in my immediate family that was there to support me. So it almost felt like I was never good enough. No matter how well I was doing, no one would be in that stand cheering me on, even though everybody else was. And I recognized over the years where I adopted coping mechanisms that one had me just push those feelings away, suppress those feelings, but didn't recognize how it was impacting how my body was responding. And as a result of that, I decided I gave up on the sport. In a couple of years, I was just like, I gave up because one, I couldn't support myself anymore. I was still in my teens. I stopped track and field when I was 18, and I recognized that if I had the support, and this is all in hindsight, if I had the support, maybe I'd still be doing something that I love. And I think looking at athletes, there's so much pressure that is put on them, so much pressure that they put on themselves, first and foremost, to perform. And they don't realize that sometimes they're the ones causing their own injuries because they're not dealing with the emotional trauma, the emotional turmoil that's happening when you disappoint someone, or maybe you're not performing the way that you want to perform. So what I do is I walk them through navigating those emotional turmoil, changing the story, because it always boils down to a story, right? Change the story that you're telling yourself about if you're good enough, if you're doing enough. And in changing the story, they're able to actually get to their full potential. I know that was long-winded, but I got there.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, everything is so connected in our brains and our minds and our bodies. And so it makes complete sense to me that as any kind of athlete or focusing on really any kind of goal that involves your body functioning at its peak performance, that the things that are going on with us emotionally are going to impact that. Of course they are. We look at that for school performance. Emotional support plays a huge factor in can we learn. And so the same thing here, it's going to impact our body. And so
Yeah.
in what ways did that feeling of I don't have the support, I need to be better all the time, and having that constant feeling, how did that impact your performance?
You know, uh, there comes a time where your cup it starts to fill up and you're able to deal with it. You're able to go through it and it doesn't impact you at all. But it gets to that point where the cup is now overflowing, and instead of asking for help, because who are you going to ask for help from when they don't necessarily understand what's going on? It's like, okay, well, I don't know. I don't have the tools. I don't have the capabilities. I don't even know what to do. Then you decide to just kind of push it away, right? And in pushing it away, my response was to work harder, right? And you work hard and you work hard and you train and you train, and then you over exhaust yourself and you start to pull muscles. Like, thankfully, I never pulled a muscle until I was in my 30s. Oh, and when I did, boy, was it painful. And you don't know what to do with that because one, you've never experienced it, and because you're so self-sufficient, you decide to push it away, especially when you don't have the tools.
Can you give some examples of chronic pain that athletes do, like what their body, how it affects them?
Okay, so I had one particular client where he was experiencing this constant knee pain, and for whatever reason, he never spoke up. He never told his coach or what was going on with his body. He just figured, you know what? I'll just keep doing this training mechanism. I'll keep doing this workout. I can't make it look like I don't know what I'm doing. I have to be perfect. I have to look like I know what I'm doing. So he kept it to himself. Even went to a physiotherapist and just said, "Oh, I'm experiencing this pain." And they eventually, in asking him questions, and of course going through the process with me, I'm like, "Well, your knee is kind of connected to your hip. So if there's something going on in your hip, it's telling you at this point that you're not doing something in the correct way. Clearly, I don't know what the move it is that you're doing. So maybe speaking up to your coach to say, hey, when I do this, I feel this here. They have the tools, right? They have the expertise. And at that point, they can tell you to do it differently. However, most people aren't speaking up. So what happens? The pain speaks up for you. And that's all it's doing. It's communicating that something's going wrong. It's information for you. But if you're not communicating with the experts that are around you, then essentially what's going to happen is that you're going to just consistently experience this pain and then think that you have to live like this. Who really wants to live in pain? It's a question.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It's, a lot of sports training and traditional coaching for sports is focused on goal. Hit the goal no matter what.
Yeah.
You run as fast as you can, no matter what. You have to block out the pain when you're running in a race. You have to block out. And so it's pushing our bodies past what our bodies, so our bodies are yelling at us the entire time. Chris and I were on the treadmill the other day, and I said, I got to have something playing. I got to listen to something because otherwise my body is like, what are you doing? Why are you running right now? What is wrong with this? Is not comfortable. What are you doing? You're sweating, right? So my, my body is like, stop doing that. I don't go sit down, right? And so I have to have a mechanism to block that out. But the challenge is that it gets to the point sometimes where we're blocking out those things even when we're not in the performance, right? We're not in the race, we're not doing the routine, we're not in the game, but we're still using that skill that we use for the game outside of the game, and we're blocking it out when we're running practices, and we're blocking it out during all of these other things. And there are all of these messages that we kind of have to tell ourselves, very similarly to first responders and for active service, where we have to accept these messages of I got to do whatever it takes in order to perform well there, but then we've got to somehow turn it off when we're not in the game.
Yeah.
And that is so challenging because nobody's teaching us how to do that. They're teaching us how to block it out, but not how to bring it back in and accept
Yeah.
it, work, communicate it.
I think it's so situational too, you know. I think in life you're going to experience pain, but there are times where you shouldn't be experiencing pain, or there are times where you can push yourself through it, and there are times where you don't have to. And it's having an awareness of who you are and understanding of who you are and your body and what it needs and what it doesn't need. I think at that point it gives you that valuable information to say, okay, what are my limits? Because we are all in essence limited in certain ways, and it's knowing what your limit is and making sure that you're not stepping over that limit, because that's what's causing injuries, right? I remember and this was just last year, I remember I was pushing towards getting a certain goal as it relates to my body. Uh, and I was doing some deadlift squats. And for the love of me, I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know what I was doing, but I knew I pulled my hamstring. And like I said, that was probably my first time experiencing that amount of pain. And I knew why. And it wasn't in the moment that I knew why. I had to actually sit with myself to find out, okay, I've never really experienced this kind of pain before. Why this time? And in asking myself the questions, and this is the perfect example of how you can process that pain is, what was I doing in that moment to cause the pain? Because a part of it is your responsibility, right? It's what was I telling myself I needed to achieve? And is it something that I could have achieved in in a longer period? Could I have been kinder to myself? And it's just doing some introspection, and you'll recognize that, okay, maybe I didn't need to have this in a week. Maybe I could have waited a month, and being honest with yourself and being kind to yourself, to not push yourself too hard, not saying not to push yourself at all, because sometimes we need that, but knowing what it is that you are capable of.
So I'm assuming you use your hypnotherapy with athletes as well while you're doing this work. Can you kind of talk about like what that process looks like and where you start?
It doesn't look any different from how I would work with an entrepreneur or a business owner. It's the same process. It's just, I know with most athletes, they have a very hard time asking for help. So that first session is just like, I'm sorry, what is this? You're gonna do what? It's just like there's this fear that comes up, but this all started with your nervous system, right? The fact that you're feeling this level of pain started with your nervous system. So the first thing in the process is relaxing your nervous system, letting you know that you are in a safe environment. This is your process. This is for you to no longer have to experience or be uh affected by injuries or pain. And in recognizing that the outcome is not just, it's not for me, it's really for you, and it's for you to have a brighter tomorrow. Their nervous system calms down, and then we get to the story of where this pain is coming from. I think that's what's the beauty of this process, is that it's very tailored. So we hear what your story is as it relates to the pain, and you may not consciously know, but subconsciously there is a story running that tells you, hey, this pain is there to push you. And it's interesting. I've heard that so often. The pain is there to push you, to let you know that you can be better. And I'm like, well, can't you do that for yourself? Like, the pain doesn't need to tell you that, you know? But when it came about, most of the times, it was when you were a child and you have limited information, and you're just like, I've seen where the pain worked for someone in that way. Let me take that on, not realizing that that was an irrational thought. And you're having an irrational thought running your life right now.
So, can you tell us more about how chronic pain and pain that we might be experiencing can be related with our childhood traumas?
So I'll give you an example. I once had a client who was bullied as a kid. And in being bullied, prior to even being bullied, she was the bright spark. She knew everything. She understood everything. And so she would just walk with this confidence, right? As teenagers, we're a little, we're a little iffy when we see someone that walks in so confidently. For whatever reason, that triggers an insecurity in us. And because they were insecure, they started to bully her. As a result of that, she didn't want to show any emotions, so she would go home and cry about it. And in crying about it, she would be around her mom, and her mom would say, hey, don't let them see you cry. So in her deciding, okay, I'll never let them see me cry, at that point, her body is going to respond, because your body needs to release these emotions. They need to release this tension. They need to release the pain that you're feeling. So instead of her processing the emotion and understanding that these girls were just being girls, in high school, that's just how it is sometimes, she took it on to being something about her. And as a result of that, she created a belief that she can't show her emotions, she can't show her feelings. And as a result of that, her body started to show that. And she created illnesses, pain, and she's still dealing with some of them today. But at least she knows now that her body was trying to protect her in that moment instead of harming her.
So, her body's trying to express to her that she has this need to
Essentially, essentially, essentially. So I know it sounds very strange. Pain is trying to protect you. And again, it goes to an irrational thought, because it makes sense that the pain is trying to protect her. but it really isn't protecting her because it's causing her more harm than if, say, she was to be able to protect herself or speak up for herself. It's trying to speak for her.
Yes, because she's not comfortable. She
Yes.
doesn't feel like it's safe
Exactly.
to speak out for
Yeah.
herself.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very interesting. I've had uh, a couple experiences lately. I Last October I was riding a bike with my daughter and I broke my hand. And I did not know that I broke my hand until the next day. Um, and I went in for x-rays and they saw how I was interacting. I had my child with me. I was acting normal and they said, I didn't think it was broken. Like when I looked at the x-ray, I was shocked that it was broken because you're not acting like it was broken. But I think as I reflect on that experience now, because I had to wear that the brace and get x-rays from October to end of January. And as I reflect on that now, when I fell off the bike, I was so focused on because my daughter also fell at the same time. I was so focused on, oh my gosh, is she okay? What's broken on her? That I didn't notice the pain at that time. We had a totally normal day. I was using my hand, and it took a while for that pain to catch up with me. It actually took at least probably a week. I thought this is ridiculous that that they're doing, and and then it started to hurt, and
Yeah.
then I was like, oh yeah, no, it hurts. I need to wear this brace, and so one thing that kind of stood out for me in that situation, if I'm thinking back on, okay, what was my relationship with the pain of that experience at that time? And if I think about the story of that, it is that I think both emotionally and physically, my reaction to something happening is shut it all off, like immediately shut it off, and then it kind of comes later for me. I'm like a slower processor with emotional pain and with physical pain. And the and then the other situation I had recently is I have plantar fasciitis and I have like an elbow issue. And so when you started talking about chronic pain, I thought, oh, I've had this it's going to be almost a year now since I've had it. And the thing is, when I think about, well, the story of this, I haven't gone to a doctor for this. I have not, and we have a podcast where we tell people like, go to counseling. Go to counseling when you're having pain and challenges and go to counseling, ask for help. And it's hard to do that. When you said, athletes, it's hard to ask for help. And from working with entrepreneurs, it's hard to ask for help. And so as you're talking, I'm thinking, yeah, I haven't been to the doctor for that. And it's coming up on a year.
Yeah.
And so I think what you're uh, finding and what you're helping your clients to explore and to learn about themselves is, yeah, what is that? What's causing that pain is one thing, but then how we're reacting to it and what we're doing with that really tells us a lot about ourselves. Um,
Yep.
because I was not willing to go to the doctor, but I did buy some like braces that I have to, that I wear at night. And that it's helping, but there's the asking for help of my husband every single night, putting these things on me, right? Versus I haven't been to the doctor about it and it's been almost a year. So it's just interesting to think about the reaction to pain, how that pain kind of uh, how my relationship is with
Yeah.
and the thoughts that come up when I think about going to the doctor about it, right? Because I think, well, they're not going to do anything about it, right? Like I have thoughts of like, well, they're just going to tell me, I need to do things different or whatever it is, and I know that.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's just very interesting what we do with pain, and once we really start thinking about
Yeah.
relationship with pain.
And it's something that I reflected on about a week ago. What was my relationship with pain? And it was very similar to yours, where it was very much avoidant. It's like, I'm sorry, it's not there. What are you talking about? And then when I guess I transitioned from it's not being there, pretending that it doesn't exist, to trying to escape it with different coping mechanisms, to now being one that is more preventative. I'm aware that if I do this, that it's going to cause me pain. Is it worth it? I'll go through it because I know it's temporary. If it's not worth it, I'm not doing it at all. And even to your point, as it relates to going to the doctor, I know even with just doing my research and just seeing what's going on in the environment, a lot of people don't necessarily feel heard by their doctor. In fact, they'll say they don't know what's going on or it doesn't exist, like you're making this up kind of thing. I'm like, who wants to make up pain? Right? It's not a matter of it being made up. It's just we don't understand chronic pain in a way that we need to. And I think that's my mission, is to have people understand what chronic pain is and where it's coming from and how we can actually do something about it. Not just on a physical level, but on a psychological level. And even so on an environmental level, because this all started with the environment someone was in, right? If you didn't necessarily feel safe in your environment, your nervous system started to get dysregulated, and it found a coping mechanism to cope with that situation. And sometimes pain was a result of that. Why? It means getting to the story that that person is saying to themselves and recognizing how you do one thing is most of the times how you do everything. So when you speak about, thinking about other people's needs first, I'm sure that's a theme. I'm sure that's a theme across your life. And that's a theme across people's lives that support others, right? They think about everybody else first, which is probably why you didn't even realize that your arm was broken, your wrist was broken, because you were more concerned about everybody else. And it's something that I want people to recognize, is that you have needs. And it's okay to meet those needs. You're not being needy to meet your needs. It's important to meet your needs.
Okay, so you mentioned like we can't change our own environment that we grew up in, which is a lot of the cause of that emotional pain and chronic pain that people now have. Is there any suggestions that you can think of for athletes to kind of help before chronic pain gets bad? I mean, obviously, like you said, you can't change your environment, but just other things they could change to help improve that before it gets bad?
Ah, boy, if only we had control over our environment, we
Yeah.
could have avoided all of this, right? But it's reality, right? And in accepting what reality is, whew, that is a good question. That is a really good question. What can I suggest to athletes since we can't really change our environment? All right, here's a thought that's coming to my mind. And I think about it in the space of plants, because I'm a lover of plants. And I'm taking care of a pepper plant right now, and it's winter. So you really have to create the environment for it. And I'm recognizing that when I had it in a dark room close to the heat, like the heater itself, no sunlight, it was just not performing the way that it needed to perform in order to thrive. And of course, recognizing that, I decided to relocate it to a windowsill where there's always light coming in. It's still warm, and it started to thrive. And I use that example most of the times with the people that I work with, because that plant knows what its environment needs to be. It has needs, and those need to be met. As it relates to us as human beings, there are needs that we need met. We do need those needs met, and it's reinforcing that it doesn't make you needy to make sure your needs are being met. Because I think there's this thought behind it that if I make sure my needs are being met, I'm being too needy. And I think that's stopping us from getting the things that we need. I think it's stopping us from asking for what we need, to the point where we're sabotaging ourselves. We're thinking that we're not worthy of getting our needs met, and as a result of that, we're not living up to our full potential. We're not able to get to where we want to, because we don't think that we're worthy of it. So I'm hoping that I answered the question, because once I'm up here but yeah, it's just recognizing that in order for you to live the life that you want, it's knowing that your needs need to be met.
I love the example of a plant because when I think about a plant, well, so I used to live in an apartment and we grew snap peas in our office.
Yeah.
And there were blinds, those plastic blinds on the window, and the snap pea vines would just grow up the window. And they would put it, when you looked at the plant, it was so cool because all of its leaves were on the outside of the window.
Yeah.
And that it, so that plant, now the plant could not control where it was planted. Like I planted that plant where I planted it, and I put the pot where it was, where I put it.
Yeah.
The plant could not control that, but the plant did grow. It knew I need sunlight. Oh, there's sunlight in this direction, and it grew up whatever it needed to grow up to get that sunlight, and then it put all its leaves on that side.
Yep.
And it thrived. And a plant in the wild outside is going to know that it needs water. And so its roots are going to
Move
grow in the
towards it.
direction,
Yep.
and you see a tree with a river on one side of it, even if that river is a mile away, you see that all the roots, right, kind of go in that direction.
Yeah.
And it's why you can tell kind of where water is by
Yeah.
plants. So a plant will do that. And so the plant can't control where the seed falls because maybe a squirrel dropped it there, right? Or the wind brought it there. But there are those pieces that once it knows, a plant knows it needs sunlight. And so it turns its leaves towards the
Towards the sunlight. Yep.
and it grows in that direct. If it's in the shade of another tree, you'll see flowers even that grow like this around so that they get direct sunlight that they need and water as well. So it's
Yep.
just so it's so cool to that plants can do that, and they're not afraid to look weird in order to get what they need. You'll see a tree that's grown up around another tree because there wasn't space for it to grow there. And it's not going, well, I need to be perfectly straight, right, to be a tree. And
There you go.
it's gone, there's a need that I need to meet, and that's what I'm going to do.
Yep.
Um, and so for us as well, we don't get to choose the family that we're born into, and we don't get to choose the experiences that happen to us, especially as children. But we do get to, once we learn that we've got this power, we have some control over our lives. We get to control the story that we tell ourselves about what happened. We get to control the thoughts that we have about what happened. We get to control whether we will participate in certain patterns or not.
Yep.
And we do have that control, just like a plant that's planted in the ground still has some of that ability to adapt. So I love the plant example because
Yeah, you said it beautifully. You said it beautifully. It will go towards what it needs. And I think that sums it up, where you have to go towards the thing that you need. The challenge is, how do you know what you need? How do you know? And I've recognized the theme with most of my clients. They don't know what they need because they were once told, this is what you need, this is what you need to do. So they never really got to connect with the essence of what they needed to be, who they came here to be. So it's going through that self-discovery and recognizing, oh, so I do need to speak up. Oh, I'm really good at this, so I can do this. Let me do that. It's getting to know yourself. And it's so weird. Most of my clients are in their 40s and their 30s. So it's just like, are you telling me I don't know who I am? Yeah. And that's okay. That's okay. You're pretty early because most people don't know who they are.
You mentioned like it's pretty similar how you do your hypnotherapy with now chronic pain athletes versus when it was entrepreneurs. Are there any differences to working with those different groups?
No, we're all the same. We have very, very similar beliefs. It always boils down to feeling like you're not good enough, feel like you're not worthy. Every time that I've done a session, I can't remember ever not feeling like I was good enough. Or maybe, I was different and being different wasn't necessarily accepted. I'm going to be rejected. Still the same, not being good enough.
That fear, that survival fear of
Yeah.
not cutting in,
Yeah.
and not being worthy of
Yeah.
the things that we need. And when we do find what we need and we make steps towards that, that can cause a lot of issues. That can cause a lot of interrelationship challenges. That can
Yeah.
cause a lot. So, how do we prepare ourselves for that? And how do we take those steps that we need to take in order to meet our own needs and cope with all of the things that then potentially happen? So if I'm exhausted in the afternoon and I've got meetings all day and I my body is yelling at me, you are tired. uh if I lay down and take a nap, that causes a lot of challenges internally, because that goes against my identity, my how I feel like I am for my identity, right? That goes against a lot of the values that I have. And then it's going to cause problems for other people as well, which is also an identity piece.
Yeah.
So how do we do that? How do we take those steps?
You know what? This is not going to be an answer that not even I like. You just got to do it. This identity that you're holding on to, this tight grip that you have with your identity is a part of the problem. This identity was created for your own survival. Are you needing to survive today is the question. Do you need some of these coping mechanisms? A lot of the things that we call our personality is really a coping mechanism. If we look at it, if we're being honest with ourselves, it's just a coping mechanism. So if the coping mechanism is actually getting in your way now, this thing that you call your personality, just as how you can create it, you can destroy it, you can release it. So this chokehold, it's just an illusion. It's just an illusion. And it's keeping us in a delusional state where we're not being honest with ourselves. And in being honest with yourself, we know we've heard this, the truth. The truth will set you free. And that's the truth. If you start being honest with yourself, you're not going to like what you have to say sometimes. You're not going to like what your practitioner, your therapist has to say sometimes, but it's what you need to hear, especially if you respond in a way where you become very defensive and you start to put that wall up. Question why you're putting that wall up.
You are, I think, one of the most open to transformation people that I know. I feel like every time that we talk to you, that we catch up with you, you've got something new, and it feels like you are living life. I mean, we're hearing mostly about your career, but it feels like you're living your career with an open hand.
I
And
have to.
so, yeah, and so not grasping tight of things that are not for you or serving you, and also accepting things that are coming to you. And you are so in tune so often with the messages that are coming to you. um it's it's really cool for me to see. It's very inspirational for me every time I talk to you, because you are so in tune with those things. You notice messages coming at you that might seem like everyday things to somebody else, but you notice them because they're for you. And it's just very cool to see that. And you have done the work to be able to let go of those identifiers in career. I think in life too, in general, just being a ever shifting, ever adapting person, and not having to have that mold on you all the time.
I have to. I have to. I've seen what holding on tightly to something that I think is serving me has done. I can't sit here and tell you that the last year has been great. It has been transformative for sure, but there were moments where I questioned if I wanted to continue to do this. And of course, I'm going to get emotional. That's just my thing. So I questioned it because I'm like, there is no way it's supposed to be this challenging. And I'm sharing that because it is going to be challenging to transform yourself. Like diamonds don't just become diamonds, through a smooth process. It takes some challenging moments where you have to just understand that it's going to be worth it in the end. And that's what keeps me going. It keeps me going because if it was left to me sitting here with the things that I've had to navigate, and I'm being very transparent with you guys right now, very vulnerable with you guys. And I think it's very important to be this vulnerable because this is what happens in a session with me. You have to release your ego. Your ego wants to make you look perfect, but you're not perfect. You're not. You don't know everything. You're not going to know everything ever. And you have to be okay with that. The uncertainty that comes along on this journey of transformation, of releasing all of these emotional turmoil, ooh, it's a lot. But there is such a brighter tomorrow on the next side. You don't stay there. You don't stay there. There's almost like you go to different levels and you're just like, man, I thought this was done. No, you're not done. You're not done. There's more.
And it seems like kind of having something to move towards, when you talked about working with athletes and you talked about that personal connection there with your own experiences, I can feel that. I can feel that connection, that draw towards that thing, which then it does mean letting go of other things that we had draws to before, and that letting go is so painful, and but we've got that draw, and I think we need that, and I think that a lot of times as humans we've got what feels safe, we got what's working in a lot of ways. And so we don't go looking for the thing that is drawing us, that's pulling towards us. And if you had said, I am a coach who works where I am a hypnotherapist who works with female entrepreneurs, and that's me, I can't do anything else other than that, then you wouldn't have been looking for that pull for that thing to move towards. And so I just think it's so beautiful, real life modeling that you do. I'm always so excited to talk to you because
Well, you know what's funny? We know, like, I think we'd be sitting here and lying to ourselves if we say we know there's something missing. We always know. I don't know if it's a woman thing, but we know that this can't be it. No, you just know that there's something more. And not that you go in search of it. My experience has been that it finds me for the most part. And now I'm being forced to go towards it. And I've lived a life, majority of my life has been, it just comes to me. So I'm making that transition now. I'm just like, shit. So you're telling me I have to go? So like I have to initiate this? And I'm like, God damn. I don't want to, but I have to.
And it's because you're open to those messages.
Yeah.
And if you were in snooze mode, like a lot of people are, it's feels safer sometimes to hit snooze on those messages that come for us and
Yeah.
those things that come towards us, to hit snooze and say, nope, that's not for me, and to dismiss that. But in that same way that we might do that for about our pain and not listen to the messages of that, we can do that in our lives too when we have fear of transformation.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely.
uh,
Really good conversation today. I think I even needed it for myself. So I'm grateful that we're talking about this.
I love it. I just love talking to you. I just think you are, yeah, you are my personal favorite. I just love talking to you, and I think that you say things that you don't. You say a lot of great things, but you also say things that you're not verbally say. I don't know what it is, but it's really really cool, and I think that anybody working with you is going to really learn a lot about themselves, a lot about how they're feeling, and being able to tap into that. And I think a big part of that is that you are willing to model that. You're willing to show that it's possible to be vulnerable and strong, that it's possible to leave something to move towards something that you are called to do,
Yeah.
and that we're allowed to listen to our bodies. We're allowed to listen to our wants and our needs, and take actions to fulfill them, even if it causes challenges for us and even when it's hard.
Yeah.
I just think it's
I
beautiful.
think you asked me a question as it relates to, the disruption that it's going to cause
Yeah.
as it relates to maybe your family member, the people around you. I'll say this, and it's not going to be, oh, if they love you, they'll just understand. No, it's definitely not that. You're going to lose people. You are. And you're going to lose them in a way that's going to transform your life. I've always said, if you are being your most authentic self and someone doesn't like that, someone can't appreciate that, and they want to desert you or abandon you in that moment, they were never for you. They were only around for you because of what you were doing for them. And now that you may have decided, okay, authentically, this isn't doing anything for me, it's no longer doing anything for them, so they leave. And those are codependent relationships, right? But do you want codependent relationships or do you want interdependent relationships where there's this even flow of reciprocity? That's my word. Reciprocity. It shouldn't be one-sided. Like, I know that's what we were taught, but no, it doesn't work. Long term, it does not work. It is not sustainable.
Absolutely. I think coping has us go far on the interdependent, or on the, yeah, codependent side, or far on uh,
Independent. Yeah.
the extreme autonomy side, and
Yeah.
I don't need anybody, I can do it myself kind of side.
Yeah.
And the idea that no, there's those are not the only two options, those are not the only safe places
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
it is safe to be in interdependence.
Yeah.
And I think yeah, that's beautiful. It's a spectrum, and we're always, sometimes we oscillate between between the two extremes.
Yeah.
And we deserve to be in the middle there. And I think sometimes with relationships, we think, well, I don't have control over relationships because there's another person involved, but we do. We have control over everything that we do and say and put boundaries on, and feel with the relationship, and ask for and give and receive.
Oh
um
yeah.
so it's beautiful, and it's very empowering. uh,
Yeah.
the
I
idea of,
look at it like a Venn diagram, and you have your own individuality, the other person has their own individuality, and then we meet somewhere in the middle. How we get to the middle is dependent on those boundaries, those tools, that allow you to still be your authentic self, but also involve that person in your own world and you also in theirs.
Well, we love having you on the show. I'd love to have you back again, of course. I just love talking to you. I just love it. Your website is indivinethyme.com, and time like
the herb,
herb,
Thyme.
the herb, in divine time, which I think is such a appropriate name for what you do, because you focus. We're not forcing things to happen. We're allowing things to happen. We're stopping things from happening. So indivinethyme.com, and that's where you can find a questionnaire too that can kind of help connect you with Caurel and express a little bit about why you're coming in. And there's a lot of resources on this site as well. So I would say go check that out. And then on Instagram, it's in Divine Time as well. So lots of resources there too.
I'm Caurel Richards, and we all need counselors.
Absolutely.
Me too.
I'm Chrissa Hunt.
And I'm Julie Johnson, and we need a counselor.
So do you.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the You Need a Counselor podcast. We are so grateful that you're here. Now, we want to hear from you. Text us or give us a call at 515-650-3231. You can also find and connect with You Need a Counselor on Facebook and Instagram. If you've enjoyed today's show, please take a moment to like, review, or leave a comment, as all of these things help others to find and benefit from the podcast as well. If you're in the state of Iowa and interested in mental health counseling or behavioral health intervention services, give us a call at 800-531-4236. And if you're a provider seeking play therapy CEUs, you can find us on patreon.com/youneedatraining. We'll see you for the next episode, Sunday at 5.